Excellent. Well, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Vale of White Horses Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Max Thompson. I'll be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely if they wish through Microsoft Teams. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. I have 5 housekeeping announcements. Firstly, for those joining remotely, when you're not speaking, please ensure your microphone is muted and your camera is off. If you share a presentation on the screen, please stop sharing as soon as it's no longer needed. Public speakers must only have their cameras on and be unmuted when addressing the committee or answering questions of clarification in their designated slots. Evacuation procedure, for those of us here in person, in the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right, and please stand by assembly point 9 outside. On arriving at the meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register. Please inform Democratic Services if you have not done so. Thirdly, mobile phones, please off or silent. Fourthly, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the application they're concerned about has been debated, you're very welcome to do so. You can leave the main entrance from which you came in, but please do so quietly. And then fifthly, when the meeting has ended, I'll ask for confirmation the live stream has ended. At that point, please make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. And finally, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public attending the meeting, both those here in person and those online, ensure they do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberations outside of those who've registered to speak in their allocated slots. Great, so now on to agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Emily Barry, do we have any apologies this evening?
We do. We received apologies for absence from Councillor Scott Horton, who is substituted by Councillor Emily Smith this evening.
Thank you very much. And would you mind taking a roll call?
Certainly. Councillor Ron Batstone.
Present.
Councillor Cheryl Briggs. Present. Councillor Jenny Hannaby.
Present.
Councillor Robert Madison.
Present.
Councillor Mike Pighills.
Present.
Councillor Jill Rayner.
Present.
Councillor VOWH.
Present.
Councillor Emily Smith. Present. And Councillor Max Thompson.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now turn to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of October. Does anyone have any comments, or would someone like to put forward a motion we accept these as a correct record? Councillor Hannaby?
Propose the motion to accept.
And seconded? Will someone second that? Councillor Madison, thank you very much. I assume there's no debate, so all those in favour? I assume in favour. Councillor Hannaby?
I just realised I read the meetings, but I don't think I was here at that meeting, was I?
No.
In which case,
Well, we may still propose, but if you prefer
we may,
not to.
yes, we will do. So in that
Oh, I
case,
can still propose because I have read them.
but
You know I
that's
read my
fine.
minutes.
All those in favour of adopting those as correct records? Those against? Any abstentions?
Sorry.
Those are accepted as the
It's in the
records.
box, right?
Thank you. Now, agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor VOWH.
Yes, on item 7 on the agenda, I'm the ward councillor and therefore will not be taking part in the debate.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, urgent business. Paula Fox, is there any urgent business this evening?
Please confirm no urgent business, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And then finally, public participation. I confirm we have a number of registered speakers on the items this evening, and we've also received some statements which have been circulated amongst the committee and have been read, and we may make reference to in our questioning or indeed in our debate. And with that, I ask Councillor Shaw to take her leave, and I turn to agenda item 7, which is Pemberley, Lamborough Hill, Luton, and Katie Cook. I believe you're presenting on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening. Yes, so this application is Pemberley, Lamborough Hill in Wootton. Just to start, there is an update to the published report. Section 7.26 makes reference to a response being awaited in relation to a pre-commencement condition. I can confirm that an email has been received from the agent confirming that they are happy with the proposed pre-commencement condition. So moving on to the actual application itself, Pemberley is a detached dwelling situated on a large plot on the southwestern side of Lamborough Hill, from where vehicle access is obtained. The application seeks planning permission for the partial demolition of the existing property and the erection of 2-storey front and side extensions and dormer windows. Permission is also sought for the erection of a detached garage with accommodation above, within the front garden, and alterations to the existing access. So here we have the existing front elevation top left, proposed front elevation top right, and proposed rear elevation at the rear, at the bottom there, sorry. This shows the side elevations of the proposed dwelling, plus the elevations of the proposed garage. So for reference, the left elevation, as shown, faces Conifer House to the southeast. The right elevation, as marked, faces Tudor Cottage to the northwest. The front of the garage, with the two small dormers in that you can see above the garage doors, faces towards Tudor Cottage, with the rear elevation backing onto the rear elevation of the neighbouring detached garage at Conifer House. In terms of the proposed floor plans, the red dotted lines that you see indicate the position of the existing walls within the property. As you can see, it's projecting forward of those, with the rear conservatory and the side single-storey extension no longer there, being demolished as part of the proposal. And the new garage, as you can see there, poses vehicle parking and bicycle parking up the ground floor, with an internal staircase leading up to a workshop and a bathroom area. So if we move to some photos of the site, this is the front of the property from Lambrah Hill. So you've got the view from the road, and one slightly further in, you can see Conifer House on the left of the photo at the bottom right. This is the rear of the property. The conservatory has been demolished. You'll note there's already an existing dormer window, a flat roof dormer window on the back. And there's a roof light you can see in the single story element on the left-hand side of that picture. Finally, we have some pictures from the neighbouring garden at Tudor Cottage. So the left-hand picture shows there's some trees in the way, but behind that you can just see the top of the dormer window in the application property. And the roof light that we referred to in the single-storey roof will be changed to a dormer window, but it's to serve an ensuite, and it is proposed to condition that to be obscured and fixed to endeavour to prevent overlooking of that garden. And the final photo there on the right-hand side is the view from the front garden of Tudor Cottage, looking towards the application site. You just see the gap between the two trees. You can just make out the roof of the neighbouring garage. So the garage will sit in front of that, facing towards this part of the garden. And that concludes my presentation. The recommendation is one for approval as per the conditions laid out in the report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll return to you for some questions once we've heard from our speakers on this application. So our first registered speakers are Vivian and Michael Lee. Mr. and Mrs. Lee, please, could you come up? Excellent. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, and then committee might have some questions of clarification for you afterwards. So thank you very much. 3 minutes when you're ready.
Chair. Good evening, members of the planning committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of my planning application for our family home. My name is Vivian. I'm the applicant with my husband, and this project is wholeheartedly driven by our goal of creating a lifetime family home that balances modern functionality with the character of the local area. Firstly, I wish to thank our planning officer, Ms. Katie Cook, for working proactively with us throughout this process. I would also like to thank our neighbors for their engagement, which helped us address and resolve their concerns through the design now before you for consideration. Following the initial submission in March 2024, we received valuable feedback from planning officers, statutory consultants, and neighbors. This input led to a comprehensive redesign to ensure the proposal aligns with local policies and responds to community concerns. Key changes include reducing the building footprint and repositioning it further from the southern boundary with the Conifer House, simplifying the front elevation by removing the two-story front projections and replacing the front balcony with a more modest design. Redesign the front gate and boundary, revising the materials to prioritize brick and slate, introducing a mansard roof design for a better integration with the area's character. The garage addressed privacy concerns through internal adjustment by moving the external staircase indoors and incorporating secure cycle storage to meet modern living standards. These changes reflect careful consideration of both the local setting and the feedback we've received. I'm pleased to confirm that after constructive discussions with our neighbors, no objections remain. The revised design now better preserves the character of the original house, respect the scale and massing of nearby properties, and aligns with local planning guidelines. With these thoughtful improvements in place, I hope you will support this proposal. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll ask if there are any questions from the committee for you. I can't see any. I think I just have one, which is that Ladbroke Hill can be quite a busy road. We went on a site visit. Thank you for letting us come in. I was just wondering, during the construction phase, do you envisage that the majority of the vans and deliveries will enter the property, enter the garden to do that rather than parking on the main road?
Yeah,
because we're it is quite a busy road. So I was just wondering what you thought about.
Yeah,
we got 40 to 50 meters for front garden,
Yeah.
so it's enough space to park any vehicles from the back.
Thank you very much. That's all from me. Any further questions?
No.
In which case, thank you very much for your time this evening. And I now call upon our next speaker on this application, Councillor Shaw. Good evening. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. I called this matter in relation to the plans originally submitted, which had been superseded by the plans now before you. Whilst I feel that the current plans verge a bit on overdevelopment of the site, the windows facing Tudor Cottage and Conifer House do not cause problems with overlooking, so in consequence, I'm not actually going to be asking you to refuse the application. My concerns over the development revolve around the construction process. You will have seen the statement from a near neighbour indicating that earlier work at the property has taken place in what can only be considered to be antisocial hours. Whilst it's possible for neighbours to raise the issue with our environmental health officers, I would ask you to add a condition to restrict working hours to, say, 8 or 8:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, and 8:30 to 1 on Saturdays, with no working on Sundays or bank holidays. Such conditions would mean that the neighbours will not be inconvenienced, and the applicant and the builders will be able to plan their work around, a work pattern much more easily. Yes, our chair has already raised this point. It's construction traffic. It should be accommodated on site during the construction period, since the main road is, as those of you who went on the site visit will see, was a very busy road. Side roads always have considerable amount of on-street parking. Some concern has been raised about overlooking at the end of the garden of Tudor Cottage from the dormer windows above the garage. Despite the fact that the garage's windows are going 14.8 metres from the boundary, I wonder whether it will be possible for landscaping to put in extra trees or something like that, just to mitigate the overlooking issue.
You have 30 seconds.
Sorry?
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Finally, with regard to the Jim, I just wonder whether, I know it's a building regs issue rather than planning, but you know, whether that could be well and truly soundproofed. I mean, I think that the Lees might find it a very helpful good neighbour gesture.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll ask if any members of the committee have any questions for you. Can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time, Councillor Shaw. And now I turn to any questions the committee might have for our officer. So Councillor Pickles.
It might be a good idea if you just went through the aspects of the construction management plan to the side about to cover off the issue about car parking and noise and working hours. So I assume there must be some condition that we could apply there if they're not already.
Well, there are conditions that can be applied. It's whether we feel that they're reasonably necessary to include. It's for you to determine. We don't feel it's necessary, but obviously you may come to a different conclusion. We could, of course, add an informative to ensure that they're aware that there are hours that they should adhere to, as a way of ensuring that whoever builds it is aware of that. If we don't feel that the condition is necessarily reasonable, but ultimately it's for members to make that decision.
Jerry, it gives us some advice. So in terms of planning conditions, they're required to pass 6 tests. And one of them, as Katie has referred to, is that they are reasonable and directly related to the development. It would be unusual for us in the context of a household development to impose a condition that restricts hours of work and also some form of construction management plan. Looking at the area that is the, if we look on page 11, the site area that's involved, obviously the applicant doesn't have control over the areas that I think that where people might be concerned about overspill parking. I think Katie's made a very sensible suggestion about potentially including informatives offering advice on potentially those two areas where we would expect the work to be undertaken in reasonable hours, and that given the size of the frontage that we'd expect construction vehicles to be parked there. But I would say that imposing conditions on those 2 matters would be out of kilter with our normal approach with a household development. Being our advice.
Yeah, I'll take some more questions. Councillor Hanby.
Yes, I thank you for pointing that out, because I was about to sort of say, if we start down that slippery road, I don't know where we'll end. Obviously, something has gone on in the past, but that we're looking at now and the future. And it sounds to me that there's been some good conversations with the neighbours. There has been a conversation. Were you aware of that, Katie?
Yes, so I visited the neighbour at Tudor Cottage, obviously
Yeah.
photos from their garden, and they have been liaising with the applicants.
So that's something this planning committee has always said they like to see, because if you can all work together, then you can get the outcome for most. I mean, not every neighbour's satisfied all the time, but we'd get nothing done, would we? We'd never get anything done on our homes. So my question was that you were aware of that and that you were satisfied that there's been enough conversations, and out of it seems to have come a much better plan. And as I say, we've talked about construction.
Any further questions? Councillor
Yeah, so Councillor Shaw mentioned potential kind of overlooking, although there's quite a gap from this garage window, and a suggestion about maybe some planting would help. I just wondered if officers felt that that was something that would be helpful and would be reasonable to request.
We have included a landscaping condition, so that could be incorporated as part of that. So it's for the applicants to provide the details, and we would say yes or no in relation to those. And we could look at what sort of trees, bushes, whatever are placed where in relation to the neighbour. That would form part of that assessment of the discharge of condition application.
I see. So we wouldn't. So if we wanted to say that that's something that we'd like the applicant to look at as part of that, how would we do that? treat conditional, would it just be again like just us suggesting it now and then it gets picked up in those
Yeah,
conversations or sort of less formally?
Yes, it would have to be that. We couldn't
Yeah.
specifically say part of the condition.
Yeah,
It must include a tree in position X or
Yeah.
position Y.
yeah,
And just to clarify, I'm right in thinking that Tudor Cottage, who were the ones who we were most concerned about being overlooked, have removed their objection
Yes.
as it currently stands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a landscaping scheme planned with this, but you know, it'd be quite nice to have some trees along there, but it'll be up to whether the landscaping whether they think that's necessary. Councillor Hannaby.
Yes, and we've got no objections from the highway, I've noted. And so the first objections from what council, you had no comments received, which was interesting from Wootton Parish Council. And the second one is no objection. So all in all, and I've read the officer's report, which I agree with actually. So you could probably guess which way I'm going. So I think it's a good report, and I think everyone's worked together.
Good. We'll take some more questions and we'll move to debate. So any further questions on this application? In which case I'm going to call for a motion. So would someone like to propose a motion on this application? Councillor Hannaby.
I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Briggs. Okay, I open the floor to debate.
Oh, well, I'd rather debate it as I usually do. I do apologise. You are getting used to me and you're very good. But basically all the things I've said just before, I'll say again. I think there's been some really good conversations by the sound of it with neighbours, and I think that's very useful. And the parish council obviously is important because they do usually come and have some comments, and they have not commented on it and then no objection. So and I think you've recovered with the questions of the councillors all the other issues about the, well, I think the applicant's here, he can hear that what we said about construction, and I'm sure that they'll have a neighbourly, hopefully build, and it will be all okay. But I'm not sure that we should be putting restrictions.
So I mean, this will probably come up in debate. So,
Yeah.
So
But
we have a
this is a
motion
debate.
with no
I-
extra conditions on it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously my past,
Yep.
what I did in my
Yep.
my working life, I would be quite concerned about that. But I don't think we can legislate which builders the applicant has either.
Well, I don't. So, Councillor Pickens.
Well, I think one of the
So
comments
Jenny,
was-
have you finished?
Yes, thank you. I've finished. Thank you.
So, I mean, I think it's a good application, and I would support this. Having been round the property, I think what's planned is a significant upgrade, and I think you're creating a beautiful home, which is very good. However, I do have well, one thing that's very glaring if you go to that property is just how busy the road is. And I think if we can construct something which is, as you say, informative, sounds like our only option. There's some good guidance to it. The construction company is not to park on the road, because I could just see that, you know, being a real problem. So if we could do something with that as part of this approval. And secondly, I do sympathise with neighbours' fears about noise from a property during the construction phase, and I'm sure that the family would not want to have jackhammers going off after 5:30 in the afternoon. So if there's anything we can do, either through an informative to restrict the working hours in a sensible way, then I would feel very happy if we could do that.
So, so I guess at the moment we've got the motion to accept the officer's report unamended. You've suggested potentially adding an informative that would just highlight the importance of adhering with environmental health when it comes to noise, and the importance of indeed like not parking on that main road if at all possible.
But it's also restricting the hours of working.
And indeed the hours of working being.
I mean, an angle grinder makes as much
Yep.
noise at 4 o'clock in the afternoon as it does at 8 o'clock at night. It's just rather when using an angle grinder at 8 o'clock at night.
So just so I'm clear, so I know what the motion is, I just want to check. At the moment, we're considering adding an informative on this motion. Would Councillor Hannaby and Councillor Briggs be okay with us adding that informative to this? So it wouldn't be as rigid as condition.
That is only an informative.
Only an informative.
And I'm on that matter, I'm okay.
So the motion is to, just so I'm clear, the motion is to approve this officer recommendation with an informative that highlights the importance of, adhering to
Very
environmental health standards and all the things that we've mentioned in the debate, including wherever possible, ensuring that construction traffic is parked on the front.
Can I ask a question? I mean, we do have a department if there is an issue that we can go to for enforcement. So I think the neighbours would be covered in that respect.
Would you like me to
Please,
give some
if you could,
advice? Yes. So in respect of if there was an issue about unsociable working hours, that
Yeah.
would be a complaint to our environmental protection
It's
team.
exactly right.
And if it's an issue about not respecting conditions attached to development, then our enforcement team.
Yes, so I think that they have got somebody to go to if they have a concern.
Okay, anything further on this application? Councillor Wren.
Chair, I apologise for my working from my phone. My laptop's not playing. I just think it was really nice to hear such collaboration and such thought and such communication. So, for me listening to that, I think it was a really, really positive thing, and hopefully the outcome will be positive all round. So I agree entirely with the motion.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I agree with the motion with the informative added. I think that that's helpful in my experience of dealing with building in my ward. Sometimes people aren't aware of the noise restrictions, and I know that they vary from council area to council area. So I think an informative would be really helpful because it just makes it really, really clear to everybody that this is where we are. But I agree that it's been, there's obviously been some positive changes, and I support the design.
Right, well, I'm probably suggesting we move to a vote on this if there's nothing further. So we have a motion put forward to accept this with an added informative clarifying those issues. So all those in favour? Those against? The abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you to our speakers on that application. So we now move to our next item, which is item 8, the land at Townsend Road in Shrivenham. And Catherine Canavan, I believe you're presenting in this one.
Can I share my presentation?
Please do, please do.
Okay, the next application is to consider technical changes to the site at Townsend Road in Shrivenham. The development comprises 10 dwellings and is almost complete. The applicant seeks to change from providing an on-site pumping station, which would link into the public sewer, to a private sewage treatment plant discharging effluents into the adjacent ditch. To connect wastewater into a public sewer as originally planned, an on-site pumping station would be required. This would need to be located at least 15 metres from any dwelling. This formed part of the original drainage scheme to manage the foul water. One of the reasons the applicant is proposing a sewage treatment plant is that it became clear in follow-on condition and variation applications that the separation distance 15 metres could not be achieved. In comparison, sewage treatment plants require a separation distance of only 7 metres from any dwelling, and this can be accommodated on the site. Just to give you an idea of how this would work in practice, rainwater and surface water would be managed using permeable paving, allowing it to soak back into the ground. The attenuation tank, so it's the red area at the bottom here, holds a much greater amount of water, for example, during a storm, and then releases it at a managed rate towards the ditch. It's on the western boundary. A sewage treatment plant, that's the small red area just here, has been designed into the scheme to manage the foul water, which is then treated and purified before it is released into the ditch, again on the western edge of the site, or just outside the site. Sewage would leave the properties and feed into the first chamber just here. This is part of the sewage treatment plant. This is the area where the solid matter is separated from the liquid waste. In this chamber, solid organic matter would sink to the bottom of the tank, and grease, oil, fats and other scum would float to the surface. The liquid then carries through to the second chamber. The second chamber is fitted with an air pump which circulates air around the chamber to increase its oxygen content level and to encourage the growth of helpful bacteria. The bacteria breaks down contaminants in the liquids, purifying the effluent. The final stage is disinfection. The bacteria and any remaining solid waste is left to settle and then returns to the first tank for removal. The remaining wastewater, which is now adequately decontaminated, is able to flow through to the discharge point. By the time the wastewater is discharged, it is typically around 95% clean and is ready for discharging into a drainage field or a lake or stream, subject to consent from the Environment Agency. An EA permit for this site was issued in June this year. A treatment plant still needs to be emptied, and the system still needs to be inspected, cleaned out and maintained regularly. Emptying is roughly once a year. In terms of maintenance, a management company would be set up to manage the on-site drainage equipment, which is the standard process for also managing landscape and communal outdoor areas. Parts of the drainage system only used by a single household would be the responsibility of that household. Drainage equipment used by multiple properties would be managed through the management company. Beyond the site, the ditch would be managed in accordance with the Land Drainage Act, which requires the adjoining landowners up to the centre of the ditch, as shown on the image, to keep the ditch free from obstruction and operational. The site currently discharges into the same ditch, so these riparian rights are already in place. As and when the plots are sold, adjacent landowners, so this would be specifically plot number 10, would carry this responsibility under riparian rights. This shows plot number 10, the bottom corner here with the yellow outline. An advisory note would be attached to any permission, so prospective buyers are aware of this. It is also recommended that permitted development rights are removed for plot 10 to ensure no structures are put up that could cause an obstruction to maintenance of the ditch. One of the key questions that has been raised during consultation is, as there is now a closer sewer, only 50 metres away, is it possible to insist on a connection to the main sewer there rather than the private sewage treatment plant? When the EA were assessing the proposal, they had to use current data available to them, and the nearest connection was at that point approximately 200 metres away. This was a factor in the EA permit being issued. Second to this, to connect to the main sewer, the pumping station, which would have had to be required on site, had to be located 15 metres from any dwelling. Because of the size of the site, this would not have been possible without a redesign and loss of units to accommodate the pump. There is no disputing that the commencement on site was carried out prematurely, but in enforcement terms, it would not be expedient or justifiable to require a redesign of the site and a reduction in number of units to accommodate a pumping station, particularly in its current state as being almost built out. It would also put the council in a weak position at appeal, as the EA permit has been issued in accordance with EA procedures and carries planning weight. The complaint response from the EA attached to the committee report clarifies the steps the EA took in assessing the permit application. This was carried out by specialists, and the council's drainage officer has also reviewed the drainage system throughout the process and has also has also secured additional drainage information to respond to the condition requirement. On the basis that the variation relates specifically to drainage as a technical matter and has been reviewed by the EA and council drainage officers with input from the council's enforcement team, I do not see there are grounds to refuse the varied wording for the condition. Finally, the application also includes a change to materials. This relates specifically to the cladding on the fronts of the dwellings, changing it from grey boarding to red coloured cladding. Officers have no concerns over the change in materials. The application to vary condition wording relating to drainage and to vary the materials is recommended for approval. I pass back to the chair and committee to consider the application in more detail.
Thank you very much. We'll return to you for some questions after you've heard from our speakers. We have 3 speakers on this application. The first is Councillor Bob Sheldon from Shrivenham Parish Council. Councillor Sheldon, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Good evening. Well, thank you for joining us. We can hear you, we can see you well. So you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
I'm ready now. Thank you indeed, Mr. Chairman. The essence of it is that the original planning condition on this, there were several, but the one that's...
Oh, 1 second, sorry, please stop the time. You've gone on mute, so could you unmute yourself, Councillor Sheldon?
I do apologise, I don't know how that...
That's fine, don't worry, try yourself, we'll restart your time. There you go, please.
Yeah, my apologies. Yes, the original, there were several conditions placed on this development right at the beginning. One of them being condition 13, the one that we're discussing, to do with the dealing with the sewage. And it was a pre-commencement condition that they sorted out the foul sewage in conjunction with Thames Water. The developer chose not to do that from the very beginning and proceeded with the scheme regardless of it being a pre-commencement condition, which we are, to say the least, disappointed about. And we attempted to achieve, to get some enforcement to prevent construction during the process when they were building. Repeatedly, we attempted to do it, but nothing was done. So the development proceeded on that basis. The developer has appeal that produced the permit is based on some information that is, to say the least, not entirely accurate, although I've heard someone say that they had to work on the detail they had at the time. Part of that may be the length of time the Environment Agency took to consider it, which is certainly in excess of 7 months. Having said that, the permit breaks a series of the Environment Agency's rules. The first one being that, as has already been said, the original requirement was for a connection to a Thames Water sewer that was 200 metres away. The rule being, as you know, that you need to multiply the number of dwellings by 30 to get the recognised distance, in this case 300 metres. Therefore, there is no reason not to connect in the first instance. Since then, of course, there is a manhole that is less than 50 metres away. It's from the new development across the other side of the road, which was completed earlier. What is now of particular relevance is that the tank is going to go and produce a significant quantity of liquid effluent, much more than was before. And again, if you take the Environment Agency site, they confirm that this site of this side will discharge approximately 5.7 cubic meters of outflow a day. This has nothing to do with the surface water. Anything above 5 cubic meters is not allowed for a new development, according to the Environmental Agency site. So we're very we're very disappointed about that. The other thing is that the connection onto the ditches, there is a connection via a pipe between 2 ditches. The pipe is adequate for surface water and the existing condition. We argue that it is wholly unsuitable for an extra 5.7 cubic meters a day, which is going to be put into it from the development. And therefore, we believe that you should refuse the application because this is not appropriate and will lead to flooding. And that is
Councillor
not
Sheldon, I'm
because,
afraid you've had your 3 minutes now, so
Okay.
thank you very much. But there may be some questions for you from the committee, so thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councillor Sheldon?
Said it, haven't we?
I can't see any, so thank you very much for your time this evening. I call now upon our next speaker. So thank you very much, Councillor Sheldon. Our next speaker is our next speaker is Mark Willis, who's speaking in support of the application. Mr. Willis, are you there? Excellent. I don't think we can hear you though, Mr. Willis. I'm afraid we can't hear you. It might be a problem with your microphone. You're on.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. We can hear you now. Thank you very much. As with everyone else, thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you. You'll be pleased to hear that my presentation is much shorter, having heard Catherine Canavan's very clear presentation. She's covered most of the points that I needed to make. So I'd like to focus on what Councillor Sheldon, on behalf of the Parish Council, stated. Let's just go back on a few things here. Yes, it was a pre-commencement condition, but let's not forget that this application has taken 18 months. You know, we got an application in to deal with this, but it's taken 18 months. There's no, you know, that's mainly to do with the Environment Agency. No criticism of your council. It's mainly to do with the Environment Agency and their timescales, as Mr. Sheldon, as Councillor Sheldon alluded to. Even and as the officers has pointed out that even if it were possible to connect to the nearer manhole, it just isn't possible. It wouldn't be adopted by Thames Water, and indeed the crossing underneath the highway wouldn't be approved by Oxfordshire as the highway authority. So it's a complete red herring. The important thing to point out here is that there is nothing new about this site discharging to the ditch. The site was previously occupied by a dwelling and 2 workshops with 3 septic tanks. These have been discharging to the ditch for decades. These tanks have now been taken away, but there's clearly a long-standing precedent and indeed a legal right to drain to the ditch. And this also goes to the point raised by Councillor Sheldon about the volume of waste. What the Environment Agency were looking at quite properly was the increase in the amount of treated water that was going into that ditch. So if you take into account that there were 3 properties and 3 septic tanks on this site previously, and that was the starting position for the Environment Agency, then you know they correctly interpreted their guidance. And I'm afraid that Councillor Sheldon is wrong on that particular point. And also, just to, on the enforcement, it's not wrong to say, it's wrong to say that nothing happened as a result of the complaint. We were asked and we agreed to stop all work on the drainage system pending the determination of the application. There was no need to serve any notices. We did that. And finally, Mr. Sheldon's wrong when he talks about the pipes that he's seen discharging to the ditch. Those, because we haven't done the work, there are no pipes discharging to the ditch. That work has yet to be undertaken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Willis. I'll just see if there are any questions from committee for you. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Hannaby.
The owner of the land, the opposite side of the ditch, that's not the house side, is he aware and is he happy about this situation? Because he will become, in effect, a riparian owner, whether he likes it or not.
I understand the, thank you. I understand that the landowner is aware of that. He's aware of his responsibilities. It's the same landowner. The line of the ditch goes south of the site. He's well aware of the application and his responsibilities. And in fact, I sent an email to Councillor Sheldon a couple of weeks ago, pointing this out to him. So yeah, and on that point, just to be clear on this, about plot 10 and having that riparian responsibility, that riparian responsibility will stay with the management company. That responsibility will be shared by all 10 houses, not just the one house.
But again, has the landowner the other side agreed? Have you got it in writing from that he is happy and agreed this can happen?
He has those responsibilities, whatever. He doesn't need, we don't need his agreement. There is a legal right. When the land was conveyed, there is a legal right for this site, this land, to drain to that ditch. So, you know, we have not, you know, there's no requirement on us, and we've taken legal advice on that. There is no requirement on us to seek the agreement of the landowner. He has those riparian responsibilities, just as the applicant does, just as the eventual management company will.
So, Mr. Willis, just for clarity from what you said, am I right in thinking that you submitted an application to amend the drainage system before you started work on this site? Because that seems to be what you said earlier, which is that there's been a delay because the EA took a while. But am I right in saying that there was no work conducted on this site prior to that application going in, or was work commencing and then the application went in subsequently?
I don't have the information in front of me to tell you precisely when the work started. My recollection was there was only maybe site clearance and demolition that had been undertaken prior to the application being submitted. But as I say, once the enforcement complaint came in, and we were asked to stop on any work on the drainage part of the scheme, we did that. We stopped that work, and no further drainage work has been carried out since that time.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Mr. Willis? Councillor Biggles.
One minor question. What was the reason for the change in treatment to the fronts of the houses?
Purely a matter of taste. My clients preferred the red rather than the grey.
Thank you.
Any final questions? In which we say thank you very much for joining us this evening, Mr. Willis. And I'll now turn to our next speaker on this application, which is Councillor Catherine Foxall. Councillor Foxall, are you there?
Good evening, councillors. Thank
Good
you.
evening. We can hear you and we can see you, and you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening, committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The key issue we have here is the request to amend a condition in order to allow a private sewage treatment system. This particular application may have taken 18 months, but this request has twice been refused before by our council, with our drainage officers stating their opinion that a Thames water connection must be made. The developer may not be able to recollect, but they did ignore the condition in the original planning approval that prior to the commencement of development, a foul water drainage scheme had to be improved in writing. The developer has subsequently ignored our enforcement team. The development is now complete. The package treatment works has already been installed, and the homes are being marketed for sale without agreement as to how this sewage treatment will be managed. It is hugely disappointing to hear the explanation that because this site is already built, we cannot now require the redesign. I believe there are 3 reasons to require a mains wastewater connection. First, as per the regulations, it is entirely reasonable to require a connection to a main sewer. And the critical point, as both Councillor Sheldon and Catherine Canavan have explained, is that there is now a new rising main at the large Gladman development across the road within 50 metres. I appreciate you have to give way to the EA permit, but my understanding is your decision does not have to be dictated by it. The second reason is harm to the environment. The treatment system will discharge into a seasonally dry watercourse, not a network of ditches as claimed. Allowing this will discharge 5.7 metre cubed of water per day into a crop field. Rule 19 of the government regulations does not allow a discharge to a ditch or surface water that does not contain flowing water throughout the year, or to watercourses that seasonally dry up. The Environment Agency have acknowledged that this is a seasonally dry watercourse. Yes, there has been historic septic tank discharge from this site, but that was not for 10 family homes. Third, allowing a private treatment works does clear harm, I believe, to the future owners of these homes. These are homes being marketed for first-time buyers and young families in what is effectively a semi-urban situation. It is not reasonable to expect these residents to manage what is a substantial sewage treatment system or to foot the bill for a management company to do it for them. The irony does not escape me that I'm asking you to make sure that there's a connection to connect yet more homes to the failing Shrivenham sewage works, which has discharged raw sewage for 2,129 hours so far this year. But allowing this application will send a clear message to this developer and other developers that our planning conditions are irrelevant, our enforcement team can be ignored, and in the end, we will simply give in, leaving our environment and residents with the burden. If you do allow this application, I would urge you to be very clear how the conditions will be applied and this time enforced, and the quality of effluent to the environment monitored and residents protected from the potential costs and burden of this management. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boxall. I'll now ask if members of the committee have any questions for you. Just because we were getting there towards the end, I've got a quick question, which is to do with again, we'll see where the debate goes in terms of whether we vote to admit this or not. But when you ask for clarity on how the conditions will be enforced, is there anything extra you'd like to say about that, just so we can factor that into our debates?
I think I'm very concerned about the burden on residents. You know, this is of 10 families effectively having to manage this private sewage treatment works. These are not the kind of families who are buying a rural property which they might expect to deal with a septic tank or a private sewage system. These are first-time buyers. These are young families. They should quite rightly not expect to have to deal with managing sewage treatment. And if we cannot, and there's a real question about how the quality of the effluent will be monitored. We know the Environment Agency can't monitor effluent from anywhere. So and this is, I guess, I'm asking you is, what conditions can you guys put, what can your officers do to ensure that this effluent quality is managed so that we are not discharging 5.7 cubic meters a day of poorly treated effluent into a farmer's crop field?
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions for Councillor Boxall? In which to say thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm now going to turn to questions for our officer. So does anyone have any questions for our officer on this application? Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, it's before they went on this site. Obviously, a developer that knows what he's doing. They were told they had to get the sewage sorted. Obviously, they haven't. We know the Environment Agency are the most difficult people at the moment to work with. They haven't got resources or the finances, and they will not come out on site. So presumably, I forgot to ask, was this all done on a plan? Was there someone that came out? Probably just done on a plan by the Environment Agency. And I just want to know what weight this is, the Environment Agency's certificate or acceptance of this. What weight have we got to put towards that today? I think that's the main one that I've got to ask.
We're going through it has been in with the council for a long time, and the starting point was through the advice from the drainage officer that we should maintain the position of connecting into the Thames Water connection.
Yeah.
But with this EA permit, we've got confirmation that they can connect into the drainage. It's an existing drainage ditch. It's a significant material consideration in terms of how we look at this application, and that's why we'll change its stance from saying it must be Thames Water connection to we have a drainage solution that allowed to drain into that ditch, and we must give it full weight.
So going back to what our last councillor has said, quite rightly, that developers now in this situation could seem to do what they want, and then you yourself and your team have to make it work for the development. And that's exactly, I can see what her point of view is. They will, well, I don't know what you're all going to say. I'm absolutely horrified about what's happened here. This is, and I want to, I would like to know about the riparian owner, the farmer. Has he put any objections in?
That is an existing arrangement with that ditch, so it currently functions as a ditch.
But for
So
one property,
but there are
for one property.
that sits under the Land Drainage Act, so we can't tie that into the planning process. It's its own legislation that exists at the moment, and neighbouring landowners already have those responsibilities. I accept it's an increase in intensification in use of the site, but we have considered that as officers and taken advice from drainage specialists and from our enforcement team. And again, because it's covered under separate legislation, it's not something that would have a bearing on our planning decision.
Councillor Smith.
So my question's around the kind of ongoing maintenance of the system, really, and what we can consider from a planning perspective. So I have concerns in various places about sort of management companies and some of the difficulties that residents have to make sure that they're doing what they should be, basically. So I suppose I'm concerned about if we allowed this and then the maintenance wasn't done and there were problems later on, you know, is there anything we can do to strengthen that from a planning perspective, or does that fall under other legislation like environmental protection and that kind of thing?
I think that's a very fair question. The ditch and everything outside of the site is managed under separate legislation. There's some information in the supporting statement and the drainage statement over how the site itself and the equipment on the site would be managed, and the agent has clarified that it'd be a management company managing the whole site. I think it would be reasonable to add a condition specifically setting that out, so clarifying the roles and responsibilities, so that if there are problems down the line, that we could refer back to that document that's submitted by condition and clarify that this is this responsibility, this is the management company responsibility. We've got under the document for the sewage treatment plant, it sort of touches on what maintenance is required, how often, but again, that could be tied into a management company document secured by condition. So that's tied to the site. I think that's probably the reasonable step forward.
Yeah, because actually, I was going to ask about, so with the recommendation, there are conditions and then there are advisory notes. Do they act similarly to informatives?
That's it.
That's fine, because I think I was going to suggest that it would be really good to have greater clarity on the quality of the effort being monitored and how the management company would go as an advisory note. But actually, I think it may well be the case that we're looking at that as a condition, and if so, how would that end up being worded? Because I'd be a bit nervous about trying to word it ourselves with our lack of technical expertise here and now. But I am potentially, we'll see, we're going to debate, but if we were minded to put a condition on this way, what would be that process? Who would we engage with to clarify the terminology?
Picking up the various points there, I would be slightly uneasy over requiring details of the monitoring process, because that sits on the separate legislation. It is the EA's job to do that.
Yeah.
What I would be looking for is a drainage management and monitoring plan.
Yeah.
And then it would be up to the applicant to submit that by condition. That would be reviewed by our drainage officer to make sure that the correct information, the scope of the information is included in that plan.
And that would clearly be pre-occupation. I guess we couldn't make it pre-commencement.
No.
And there's nothing between the two in terms of, so it's pretty, I mean, is there anything between the two? I think it'd be unusual to see anything between the two.
I think pre-occupation would be acceptable,
Right.
because that would give us the reassurance that any equipment, any management process, any management company is up and running. We know how that's going to be managed. We've also got reassurance under the varied, I think it's condition 13, that we ask for confirmation that if they take the third option, that confirmation that a foul water system is in place. So that would sort of pick up to.
Cool. Well, we've got some more questions. We'll go back to debate. So, Councillor Pickles.
It was mentioned in the presentation from Councillor Vauxhall about the ditch drying out, being a dry ditch. Can you just confirm that they are allowed to discharge a liquid waste into a dry ditch?
That would be part of what the EA considered in issuing the permit. So I don't believe they carried out site visits, but they had the information in front of them. We've had their follow-on response as part of that complaint to say, you know, what they looked at, what their process was, what the procedure was, that it was considered a relatively small scale scheme and how they assessed it. With them being specialists and with our council drainage engineer having sort of overseen the process, I think we have to take that special advice, and I'm happy with what we've been told and that the EA permit has been issued.
So just for complete clarity, then there are no technical objections whatsoever to the plan of this scheme.
Any further questions before we move into debate? Councillor Baxter.
Yes, the developer said that the riparian ownership would be for all 10 properties, whereas I think it says in here it's actually number 10.
Yes.
And which is it?
Purely going back to riparian rights, it's the adjacent landowner. So that's the basis.
So it is number 10.
This is where an additional condition in terms of the management approach would sort of tie that down. So as I understand it, it could be the management company if that specifically ties it into that. As it stands on paper, it would be plot 10 and the adjacent landowner on the other side.
Might be very confusing for the owners of plot 10, mightn't it? I mean, yes, I'm trying to work out how the management company can be the repairing owner of.
Sorry, so I'm clear on this, just because I'm now slightly confused. Apologies. So, if there was conditional drainage and management, then that might clarify some of those issues about whether it's the management company, or are we saying no, the riparian rights are held by plot 10 regardless? Because that is a little confusing from what we've heard when I speak this evening.
I don't know the legal ins and outs of it, whether we could override that.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Yeah. So what would be the consequences if we decided that we did not like this situation and that we either deferred or turned it down? What would happen then? Would they go, do you think, Thames Water? We've heard that there is an area that they could go to, maybe a bit costly, but what, in your opinion, would happen?
I would, well, two parts. I would be very concerned in the sense that a pumping station to connect into the Thames Water connection can't be accommodated on site. So I think if we got to a situation where we were looking at this at appeal, as I understand it, PINs would factor in that an EA permit has been issued on site, and what the alternative would be, essentially a pumping station couldn't be accommodated on site. I understand there are further challenges in terms of connecting across the road. Taking advice from our enforcement team, it wouldn't be justified to rearrange the site, redesign the site, potentially demolish some of the dwellings just to accommodate a pumping station. But that's all got to be factored in. And I think if members are looking at a refusal reason, we'd have to be very specific about what the harm is and what the refusal reason ties to.
Any further questions? Councillor Shaw.
just a sort of point of clarification, are you actually saying that a pumping station can't, under any circumstances, be accommodated on site, or that it could be, but they'd have to remove dwellings?
So it would have somewhere on site, it would have to make sure there's a separation distance of 15 metres to any dwelling.
Yeah,
I think as the layout is now, it could be accommodated where I think it's where some of the parking area is. So it would block, it would essentially be right in the centre, so it cause a block to parking spaces, to the bin store. It would be up against some of the backs of the properties. So there would have to be a redesign. I think there would be space if some of the dwellings came out. That's
just the avoidance of doubt, you believe that will be unreasonable from a planning perspective to require the developer to do that?
I do, knowing that we have the CA permits, so there's a second alternative option that has been approved. I think if it went to appeal, PINS would query why we've refused it on the basis that there is a viable route to discharge that ditch.
Any further questions for Councillor Ray?
I took on board what Councillor Foxler said about the responsibility that we have for the new families in urban developments and the management company aspects. And again, it was brought up earlier. This is coming time and time again, that the management companies just are not delivering. And there's very little we can do to change that. Is there anything at this stage that can be done to ensure, first of all, the management company does its job? Because, you know, I'm a layman, I'm looking at this, and this looks like something could happen very easily and cause a lot of problems for new families. But also there's the management company are putting prices up consistently, and I just think we have some kind of responsibility somewhere, and I don't know how that lies within a planning aspect. And excuse me, Chair, if it's not the right sort of platform to speak on, but there has to be something we can do at this stage to stop families taking this on board, thinking, oh, it's all going to be fine, and then it's not, and then we can't help.
I think having the conditions setting out the rights and responsibilities of the management company is one step to manage that. I think also putting on informatives on the decision notice itself, so any prospective buyers would be aware that it's not a completely unusual drainage solution in the district, but it's slightly different to what you'd expect. In terms of the quality of a management company, I don't think we can sort of interfere with that. And it's not unusual to have a management company to manage the hard surfacing or the landscaping, or to manage the site. So that's a fairly common approach for.
No, I know it's not unusual. It's just that we get the sort of ones that aren't ideal. So it's trying to help them.
One more question, right? So if we decide to go, I've thought of this ditch, open as it is, with families moving in, children, etc. Is there anything we could say to put round fencing off the ditch, etc., so that it isn't accessible to people going, kids from water or anything scootgy? So it's just how it is. I mean, I'm quite horrified actually at this. I really am horrified. But is there anything we could put in there?
We have considered that, and the advice from our drainage advisor has been we wouldn't want to enclose that ditch, because it starts to then change how the water moves through the site or moves through the ditch, and it needs to be open really so that it can be kept unobstructed, and so that it can be open for maintenance and management, which is why we're looking to remove the permitted development rights to plot 10. But there's one other point I think we just touched on, and it's gone.
Well, it's the actual what's going in the ditch.
Yes,
And the, if people do go in there, dogs or any, you know, it's the health. I suppose I'm after the health part.
Yeah, and that was one of the main reasons for including the presentation, how sewage treatment plant works. So it's significantly moved on from a septic tank where, so in the sewage treatment plant, it is purified, it's cleansed. The water that comes out is 95% clean, so it's treated effluent. It's not like waste is being pumped into the ditch. So
of course, they could have put a Clargester in each of the houses. That would have been more expensive, but it would have sorted the situation out for each house. But I okay, well, I think I've done all my.
Any further questions? You have a question?
Yes. I must say it was about this condition around about controlling the way the management company operates. I mean, clearly the EA are the enforcement agency with regards to what goes into the ditch. It's not the role of planning, I believe, to kind of condition that beyond what the EA say is allowed to go into the ditch. But it does strike me as that there's a lot of work to be done on that management plan, because that really hinges on the disquiet of everybody about how this is going to operate. And of course, the other issue is about plot 10. And of course, there's a slight contradiction between what my understanding of how kind of law of riparian rights works and being able to share that amongst the management company, but across 10 other properties doesn't seem. So I've got lots of disquiet about this, about how this would actually work in principle. So I think when we get into debate, we need to really talk about how that condition actually works.
Have anybody final questions, or shall I suggest we move into debate? Right, I'm going to suggest we move into debate. So to do so, I need to have a motion. So someone like to put forward a motion.
I think in the absence of technical objection and other kind of material planning concerns, I think we have to accept this. However, we do need to kind of like bottom down really on how this actually works in practice, and I think it's an obligation us to get the conditions right, so we can do as much as possible to move that forward and guarantee that the people who move in there aren't left holding the proverbial very nasty smelly baby, as it were.
So, so just so I'm clear, the motion is to accept the officer recommendation, but to add a condition, just so I get the wording right, which would be a drainage management scheme, which would be submitted prior to any of the properties being occupied.
Correct.
And just from the discussion earlier on, just so I'm clear, were there any other informatives that we wanted to be flagged to any potential buyers, or is that covered under the riparian rights plot 10? Yes, I mean, do we want an informative about the management companies to be attached so people are made aware when they buy?
Well, I think what I was probably saying badly is I think particularly for plot 10, I think there has to be a solution in place so that the whole scheme doesn't fall on them if it goes wrong. It falls on the management company. I don't know how we do that, but
I think we've got to be quite clear about what the legal responsibility is. And we couldn't override that through the planning process.
So I think we've got a motion. I need to see if we've got a seconder to accept the recommendation with that drainage management scheme prior to occupation. Does I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rain. Okay, I now open the floor up to debate. Quite a lot has been said already.
I'm really very concerned as someone sat on this planning, the way things are going at the moment with developers. They are quite clever at doing these things. That's all I can say, really. I think this is a horrendous decision we've got to make today. And the Environment Agency, I think, has again let us down in this area. I think that because of the situation they're in, the way they're understaffed and underfunded, and the way they work now is nothing like we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But we are faced with the situation that I think we're resolving the situation, and I wouldn't want that to keep on being the case. that we come here as a planning committee and the officers are resolving the situation of not our making. And I think that's my statement.
Anything further on this application?
Well,
Councillor
I'll just say,
Vickers.
I mean, I don't like this application. I don't think anybody in the right mind would like it. However, in the absence of any technical objection, unless somebody can point to a material planning concern, I don't see how we can't approve this. However, we need to make sure we kind of get that condition right.
Anything further? Does anyone have anything further to say about the specifics of the condition that haven't already been mentioned as part of the discussion thus far? I think we probably discussed that. So.
I don't know. I think I'm just expressing concerns. We have a management company here that, and we've heard lots of stories about what happens to management companies. They're taken over by other companies. They raise fees exorbitantly. And of course, these poor house owners don't have the option because their sewage is very much tied to their management company. So it really is a very monopolistic situation as far as I don't think there's anything to do about it, but I think it's a terrible situation.
Yes, anything further? Sorry, I'm Paul Fox. Would you like to come in on this one?
Yeah. I think this site has a particularly complex history, and I think there are an unusual set of circumstances. I think where I might have a slight difference of opinion to some of the views that have been expressed. I don't think any developer wants to stop work. They were told to stop work and they respected that advice. If they had proceeded, that would have been entirely at their own risk. And obviously it's in a number of parties' interest to try and find a way forward. We have worked really hard with the Environment Agency, Thames Water, our own drainage team and the County Council, and involved our enforcement officers to try and get to a sort of way forward. In the event of the council resolving that this is not an acceptable solution, as Catherine's touched on, the fact that the EA have granted a permit would obviously be raised. With the points that have been raised about management companies, I think we can all draw on or have heard bad experiences, but in an appeal situation, we would be told that that is a separate issue. Developer has a right to use or approach a development company. It's a legitimate vehicle currently, and it sits separately to planning matters. So I think we've got to concentrate on whether or not we find this scheme as presented with the conditions acceptable, or with an additional condition which is around a drainage management along the lines of Catherine suggested.
Yeah, I mean, the motion we've got is to accept it with that condition attached. Is there anything further in debate to be said, or should we take a vote on this? Sorry.
Can I run through draft wording for the condition?
Please do, thank you, that would be very helpful.
So it could be along the lines of prior to occupation, a drainage management and maintenance plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and so that would we would have consultation with the drainage engineer. Details included in the plan shall include drainage maintenance for the off-site ditch, which would then touch on riparian rights and legislation that covers that. Also drainage management for the on-site drainage scheme, rights and responsibilities of the management company and occupants, and a maintenance schedule, so we would understand how regularly each elements would have to be cleaned or maintained. And that, so once approved, the plan would come into effect prior to occupation.
Okay. But is it possible to add something in there about the monitoring of the outflow specifically?
I would be hesitant to do that because I think that's covered under separate legislation, and the Environment Agency would be best placed.
Well, I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective. I mean, so that maintenance happens in the right way, you must know there must be a test to make sure the system's working effectively. That's out. That could be outside of the VA's involvement. So there should be something in the management plan of the system which says we'll be monitoring how it's how effective it is.
I think we can secure how regularly it's maintained. In terms of the monitoring, we would have to make sure it's enforceable. I'm not sure in the planning, in the planning team, who would have the expertise to go and carry that process.
I think the regularity is key in that second capture. So look, that's the motion we've got before us. I am going to suggest, unless anyone wants to say anything further, that we take a vote on this. So, all those in favour of this application? Those against? Any abstentions? That passes. The application is approved. And that brings us to the end of this meeting. So all I need to do now is say thank you very much to our officers, to all our speakers, and indeed to you committee, and wish everyone a very happy Christmas. And with that, Susie, could you stop the live stream?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.